Hello everyone and welcome. I'm Mike Goodicke, founder of Belief.
I'm Kane Roberts, producer at Belief, and we've created a little piece for you about inspiration and developing disciplines that will better prepare us for our industry.
Yeah, in order to be fair, we really wanted to challenge each other by doing a live performance to this video. So you'll hear little beeps, that's a little trigger for us to shut up.
Sometimes we'll hit it right, sometimes we might get it wrong, but hopefully it's going to lead us down new creative avenues.
So our story begins when Thomas Edison was trying to have his AC power, what he called a safer power, win out over DC. And the way he did this, to prove his point, he actually created a movie camera and filmed an elephant being electrocuted to death by DC power. He filmed lots of animals being killed.
Dogs, cats, he was kind of a mean guy actually.
But you can see the power now looking at this imagery and how when this film went on tour across cities all across America, how his AC power would win out because people would see the dangers of DC power.
You know, Mike, this is the first promo.
Here it was, the first promo was born. And of course, as we know, in the end, AC power won, and that's what we all use. So there is power in promo. The lesson learned, a good promo can influence the world.
Yeah, it's funny too because very often an ad is going to appear on TV and suddenly 15 just like it will appear. I think this does a disservice to everybody. It kind of ruins the process. We want to see you in your work. We want to see what you see in your world.
Yeah, design is an art form. It's not just a job. It's really a lifestyle. You have to immerse yourself in your work. You have to constantly be living with it. And everywhere you go, everything you see, be influenced by it.
Yeah, one of the things I've heard you say, and it's something that I believe as well, if you're going to present something, you should feel like you can't wait to create it.
Yeah, I mean, you don't want to present creative ever to a client that's not something that you really want to produce, because why?
Right. Well, because you're just going to be doing it for money, and that's not the inspiration.
Right.
That you
And
need.
also, they'll choose the idea you don't like.
Right. And you're ruining the process. You're ripping off them, and you're ripping off yourself.
Exactly. When you create a piece, you should be thinking about it every night and can't wait till you get in the next day.
Right. I mean, there are limitations. It's tough. You're stuck in this process. The client is making demands of you, but that's where you have to pull in these other sources of creativity.
You have to test your beliefs. What is important to you? What do you believe so firmly in that you can't wait to create it?
Right. You'll be offering something to the world as opposed to just something to that particular paycheck.
That's why we're in this industry. We're in this industry to shape views, avoid trends, and to set new design aesthetics for our clients.
Yeah, I mean, like really, where did this all come from? I remember people's first notions as to why they want to create art, why they want to sit in front of a computer, why they want to play music. That sort of thing you have to source constantly in every sort of conversation that you have with these people, these clients.
If your clients recognize your passion, they will thank you for your passion.
Right, and that's the road to success ultimately. Personally, financially, whatever way. I mean, this is our greatest hope.
Passion is infectious.
Yeah.
And when you're passionate about your work, people can sense that and they'll want you to produce your work.
Right.
And you have to recognize that this is definitely commercial art, and there is a client to answer to, but you can still be excited within the working constraints that are set up by that particular client.
No, if it's a question of how do I pick a broadcast designer, well, one thing I know is I couldn't draw my way out of a paper box. But for me, I always look for the graphic designer who just knows. Now, he may know and be completely wrong, but he just knows. What I can't stand in graphic design is, are the graphic designers who go, oh, you like red? Oh, here's red. Oh, you like green? Oh, I like green. You like polka dots? Oh, here's polka dots. I just can't. It drives me nuts because in the same way that when you make a show, you don't want a producer or a director who's a whore who says, well, I'll give you what you want. You want somebody who, rightly or wrongly, has conviction in what he or she is doing. Usually along with that conviction is a greater possibility that there's some originality and that there's some spark of imagination there. It's the person that you just run from at 100 miles an hour who says, oh, you don't like that? Oh, we'll give you polka dots instead.
To me, design is an art form. Today, I think that's a given, but A 10-second piece on TV is as much of a cultural event as any museum piece. Just because it enters the social consciousness, the culture of the world, as soon as somebody sees it.
It's a global thing that happens when something goes on television. It's broadcast and people see it and start talking about it, and then it spawns this sort of creative energy all around the world.
You know, it's funny too, because you have this entire landscape in front of you, this whole world of possibilities.
Yeah, I mean, really, my role as creative director is to shape the visions that the designers are passionate about, but make it right for the client. Obviously, not forgetting this is commercial art.
Right. And in that process, I've seen it happen here at Belief, and I've seen it 100 times in any sort of creative system. You have to challenge your creative people, because it's important for them to cannibalize the world, pull from the world, from their lives, from what's around them, and not just from the industry that they're in.
Exactly. Be influenced by everything you see around you. Don't just copy stuff you see on TV.
Yeah, because it starts to lose its soul. The more you see, if you see something you like and I go, I just want to steal that, I just want to do that exact thing, you're not going to hit the same mark as that guy that created it.
No, because the original vision, that is what you're influenced by, has a purpose. There is meaning in the original vision, and that's why it works the way it does. But once you cannibalize that, once you reproduce that, it loses its heart, it loses its soul.
It's the same thing as if you take a picture of something. It's a different thing than what you're seeing with your eyeballs. From that event, that photo has got a different purpose and meaning.
Sex without love.
Yep.
I think the music business is doomed. The difference between music business in the 70s and the music business today, from an artistic standpoint, is that groups of the 70s, like Led Zeppelin or the Rolling Stones, who were big at that time and were the leaders, came to the stage not trying to be like someone else, where everyone subsequent to that has either been trying to be like Mick Jagger or Robert Plant, basically, in terms of style. So what's happened is it's like a piece of a Xerox page. If you keep Xeroxing the copy and then take the copy and keep Xeroxing, eventually you can't see the print on the page.
So this leaves us this really annoying question. What is the Xerox and what is the original? When you see something and you're influenced by it, are you really seeing the original thing that inspired that creation? Or are you seeing a Xerox?
Yeah, it's like just because the first time you saw it doesn't mean it's the first time it happened.
Which is the Xerox and which is the original?
I remember there's an ad came out that really affected everybody. It won awards and everybody said, this is the first time I've ever seen anything like this.
This is so creative. You know, it's just an amazing spot.
But where did it truly come from?
Yeah, let's check it out.
Isn't it nice when things just work?
So actually, this piece was really a great Xerox of an original done by two artists. Here's the original, and we can see that the original is very crude and very, you know, rough in its form. It's not as slick as the glossy commercial, but the essence of what inspired the COG commercial came from this original art piece.
Yeah, you know, his brilliance, the person that made COG, is in the clever linkage of one seemingly unrelated event with another. He used genius in order to create a piece that can communicate a commercial value.
Right, it's transfer of medium, taking an idea from one medium, this being the fine art world, and transposing that onto a different medium.
Remember we were talking about going beyond your remote control? To me, the great thing about this is this guy got up off of his sofa and went to an art exhibit.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? He experienced the world.
And he took a piece which was, you know, very long and consolidated it into a 30-second spot.
Like you said, he cannibalized the world. He didn't see a commercial and pull from it. He experienced art.
Right, and it's pretty close. I mean, if you look at the side-by-side comparisons here, there's a lot of identical similarities between the two pieces. But, you know, that's how the world is. Ultimately, all of this stuff was inspired by Rube Goldberg and his crazy inventions. And games like the Mousetrap spawned from that. So we sort of have this trickle-down effect through the whole world where ideas get passed on and transcend mediums.
It's almost like a flow chart.
The key for all of this is to take things that you see from other mediums and transpose those into the television medium.
You never know where you're going to find inspiration. You can take a walk down the street, you'll see a building that's going to enter your mind, and you're going to transfer those shapes, those thoughts, those feelings into a piece of art. That's what communication is. You know, if it's an inanimate object may communicate something to you, and then you communicate your version of that or that message in your own version.
I was trying to figure out what inspiration is. And I kind of find my own way to discover that. On my side, I decided that an idea is just when two things click together. It's when you just have one thought and you make it work with another thought. You have one, you see an object and it makes you think of another one. And those two objects together is an idea.
Repeating now.
So that leads us to our first approach, which is definitely transfer of mediums.
The shapes and symbols we see every day become emotional triggers as we navigate through the physical world. To understand the world around us, we humanize the inanimate. And this is the beginning of iconography.
Right, we need to attach emotion to the world we see outside. We need to transfer our residue, our emotional feelings onto things. And by doing that, we internalize those emotions and fetishize our exterior surroundings.
We've all had an experience where there's some artifact from our past that we uncover and we find, and this whole swell of emotion surrounds this piece.
Totally, we find something from our past, a photo, And suddenly we're brought back to that time period.
Yeah.
Because time and space are linked together. And there is no time limit to iconography. It transcends time. It continues on and on and on. So when the Industrial Revolution came along, we wanted to humanize that, and we wanted to make it personal. And we romanticized it, and we fetishized it, and we love this idea of robots. And what did we do when we created our first robots? We created a female figure, because men love females, so they would fantasize and fetishize the female body.
And as time goes on, it becomes more fantastic, more blatantly erotic as we begin to understand it. There's a perfect combination there of machine and flesh.
And you know, the peak of this was achieved with the Bjork video, All Is Full of Love, where robotics were fetishized to the utmost extreme. What I'm left with after seeing this is an indelible seed in my mind of what erotic robot imagery is. And forever this will become the tree that grows from this idea and, you know, pollutes my mind. And that's what happens with icons. If we think of, for instance, a shape of a bear. If you try to draw a shape of a bear, and then that comes really easy. The second time you draw a different shape of a bear, that's a little bit harder. But then by the third time or the fourth time you try to draw a shape of a bear, it becomes very difficult to tap into what exactly does a bear look like.
It's funny how technology would lead us to an erotic state.
Iconography has transcended mediums throughout time. If we take Stanley Kubrick's classic film, A Clockwork Orange, this film has influenced so many other mediums.
It's in the consciousness.
Yeah, it's in our consciousness. Here in 2004, I see a spread in Maxim magazine that's using Clockwork Orange imagery and to once again fetishize that
It's
idea.
got a lower level of effect too. It comes up from below our subconscious and then affects us visually on the surface.
So our key now is to take this idea of transfer of mediums into the real world, into the workplace.
How can we get all this information? How can we create an exercise, a technique that we can stimulate?
How can we go beyond our first knee-jerk response of what we should do for that particular project,
right,
and take on something that's more foreign and more difficult and is going to push you? Like, for instance, if you're going to write a song, if you've never been a composer, you know, now we have phones that have little composer programs on them, and we can write music on our phones and we can experiment. Even though we're not musicians, we can see it visually.
Yeah, and that's going to touch your heart in some way. Regardless of what the technology is, regardless of what your skill set is, you're going to influence the rest of your creative life.
Or discover layouts and packaging.
Remember, we were looking at all that packaging, we were amazed by the shapes and the symmetry and how it's fully functional, but at the same time, it's an abstract piece of art.
Personifying an inanimate object
is the ultimate form of iconography.
It's amazing how much we can get from a piece like that and like telling which one's the man, which one's the female.
Another way to stimulate the creative juices is to collaborate with an unexpected partner.
My biggest inspiration came from filling in for Debbie Reynolds recently. Apparently our hair colors at that time were a little bit alike. She was talking about how she's never had a facelift. And she said that how she kept her face so taut and fabulous was being like a man, where she would, like men shave, so they're always going like this and doing this and that. And so I have since, because I am 62 years old, and you'd never tell it, and that is because I do these exercises. That's been my biggest inspiration that I got from a Turner shoot.
Here's an example of two cultural icons from two entirely different ends of the spectrum coming together to create something incredible.
The idea of me getting to work with Salvador Dali was unbelievable. That was, to me, he was one of my top heroes of all time. And he had seen one of the shows and thought it was just totally surrealistic. And he loved it because it was so loud and so, it was terrifying and this and that and this. And so he wanted me to do this hologram where I was wearing a $2 million tiara and a $3 million necklace sitting on this pedestal with a Venus de Milo as a microphone biting its head off, you know, like I was singing into it. And then he would film it, and you could put your hand right through it, and it was, you know, it was really the first. But working with him was so odd because the first time we met him, he walked in the room, and he walks in, he says, "I am the Dali." The press asked me, they said, what is it like working with Dali? And I said, I have no idea. I said, because I don't understand a word he's saying, and I don't know what he's doing. And Dali jumped up, and he says, "This is perfect. It's the finest form of communication is confusion."
Very often, artists and producers from seemingly unrelated industries and cultures can test our routines and force us to new corners of inspiration.
Yeah, one of the guys I met on the plane recently was telling me about fiber optics, and they were trying to invent a way to transmit more information across the data lines. And before, it's just pulses.
Right.
But then they realized, wait, what if we made the light itself dirty and we encoded information in the light? So not only were there pulses, but within the light there was also stored information. Here were two different people coming from a technology-related field and a very much engineering light-based field coming together to create something new.
And ultimately, it influences us all. Technology will find a new way to inject cultural ideas and social events into our lives. One of the good things you can do is hire an artist from a different medium. Get a comic book artist to do your storyboards, or a fashion photographer to direct a motion medium project.
Or work in different styles. Like if you're normally good at a certain style, change that style for a particular job and do something you've never done before.
Bring your client into the creative process. Make them a player in the event.
You want to collaborate with that person.
It's a collaboration. There's no need to create a wall between the two entities. You'll both be right, you'll both be wrong. As long as you're strong about what you believe, you're going to come up with something special.
We want to say that we're free, but you're not free unless you're taking chances. So take more chances. Express your freedom and risk it all, because when you risk it all, that's how you create genius.
You want to change your perspective on life. You hire people because they don't see the world the way you do.
Yeah, and changing your perspective is a great approach for coming up with new ideas.
There's this great story that Sartre tells in his book La Nausée, and he's getting onto a bus and he's so exhausted that he can't think. And while he's walking to get to the bus, it's all about his exhaustion, and it's almost like his system shut down. He gets into this bus, and the bus has straw seats, and the only sense that's left in his system is the sense of feel, the sense of touch. And he sits there and he can feel the straw going through his pants and becoming very, very uncomfortable. He doesn't really kind of figure out where he is, and he's tired, but the sense of touch becomes overwhelming. I think that the idea of tiring out certain senses so that other ones can become more sensitive or more focused is a really good one, such as like blind people who can hear so well. So maybe if we could cover our eyes for a while, we'd hear better.
Breaking the routine is what creates excitement in our lives. It's the punchline in our day when something comes up and it blindsides us and makes us behave differently.
Yeah, changing your perspective, changing the way you come to work, changing the way you see the world in the minutest way is going to make everything seem different to you.
One exercise is to wear a patch over your eye. If you do that, you see the world differently, and you bring this different vision back to your work. You're giving your clients something that they will not expect.
Yeah, reality is really an illusion. Here is an example of taking the same visual perspective, but two alternate sound perspectives.
And changing the result. Which one did they use, Mike?
Yeah, amazingly enough, that second piece was the one they chose. And the reason why they chose that is because in MTV, this piece of music really stood out.
They challenged the status quo, and it brings us back to pulling from different influences. Classical music, rock music, bring it into the unexpected moment.
Right, and if it's a rock world, bring in classical, that changes the perspective.
Journey a different route to and from work.
Yeah, taking a different transportation medium, like riding the bus in a different place versus the subway.
Wear earplugs. You'll see the world differently. You'll hear everything differently.
When you wear earplugs, you start to visualize the world. Here's an example of that. Seeing the flowers for the first time, I mean, that's what changing a perspective does. It invites new things to come in and you can reconfigure your life. Take your office and move the furniture around or change which workstation you normally work on. That will change your perspective.
There's a guitar player that I play with once in a while. His name's Stevie Vai. And we were playing together once and we decided to switch to our opposite hand. It was an incredible experience. It almost was frightening. And we immediately switched back, and I found myself going back there to change my perspective, to sort of upset the apple cart in my life on what I do every day.
Another great example of an exercise is to set your alarm at some weird time in the middle of the night to wake you up.
One of the things you can do is think of life as under a microscope. Here's an example of a Shinola movie where these guys see things in tiny pixels, and watch how it translates to a bigger world.
So this is a 90 by 72 pixel movie, and now we've blown it up to show you what it looks like full screen. This type of limitation actually created really interesting work. With progress, new limitations are always made.
They're almost born as soon as we get a bump in speed or efficiency. For example, the internet. As soon as you can get online quicker, the mind immediately imagines a quicker way to do it.
Yeah, and it's like when Flash was invented. We invented Flash because of the medium. The pipeline wasn't big enough, so let's create a new type of technology that will, help with that limitation.
And one of the things that was born of Flash was the skip intro button.
Yeah. And a style was born from Flash, an entire flat look style, completely influenced by the internet.
Okay, so how do all these thoughts, these sort of esoteric ideas, translate to the workspace? But without limitations, the creator is going to not have any cap on what he does. They say, well, what you do is less than Mozart because you got paid. Mozart got paid. He created jingles and little birthday songs, and he worked for a living, and that's where these great pieces came from.
Here's a great way David Lynch used limitations to create genius.
In the late 90s, when cinema reached its 100th year anniversary, and a Frenchman got the idea, he had the original camera, or cameras, and he knew the formula for the original emulsion, and the only difference was he used acetate, right? Rather than nitrate-based, stock, and mixed up this emulsion and put it on 35 millimeter film, but this film only has one sprocket hole per frame, per the original camera. And the magazine of the camera, the whole camera is made out of wood, metal, and glass. A lot of wood. And it has a crank, and it has a little magazine made of wood and metal, and the magazine only holds 55 feet of film. So they got this idea they would get the camera to several directors around the world and let them make 55 seconds of film. The restrictions were you got 3 takes, you had to use natural light, you couldn't shoot sync sound, and you couldn't stop the camera. Once you started cranking, you couldn't stop.
So here's some real-world exercises about limitations you can impose on yourself to inspire new ways of creativity.
You can create a project entirely in camera without edits, without special effects.
You can use software with no plugins. So try to just use the core essence of the animation program without any plugins.
Limit your spectrum of color. These limitations will force you to find a new avenue, a new way to use the tools at hand.
In the 70s, an amazing movie came out called The Parallax View. And right in the middle of the film, there was this sequence that was built entirely from stills. Repeating those stills, changing the order of the stills, told a different story.
There's a self-imposed limitation in the middle of the film that ended up making this a very special piece.
We hope you find the test a pleasant experience.
The assumption that just because you're in a certain medium, be it film, that you have to use that is
At
broken
24
here.
frames.
Yeah, it's
the
broken
assumption
here.
that you have to use 24 frames per second in the film medium is not true.
Now, it's broken here, and it's to great effect. Suddenly he goes to these, it's almost like a slideshow or an opaque projector in a classroom.
I can imagine the impact this had on audience members when you're watching this normal movie and then all of a sudden sort of this art piece is stuck in the middle that is completely radically different than what normally is seen in a Hollywood movie.
It's a director, it's an editor that sees the value of the still image.
Iconography transcends cultures. And when you see these images and you hear this music, it doesn't matter where you're from. It will still resonate with you. It will still have some sort of meaning.
And we'll all take a different meaning home with us.
What meaning you take home with you is up to you and your own history and your own experience. And that's the amazing thing about images. They tap into our history. They tap into our childhood. They tap into our past. They tap into that moment when we were innocent, the age of innocence, returning to that. You have to just erase your slate, erase your brain, and remember the time when it was clear, when there was nothing in it and things were empty. And then you start to fill it up. You start to bring in influences and you start to build a new slate.
My friend Gautam was a programmer on PCs. He switched to Mac and he experienced a whole innocent way of looking at the world.
iPhoto is my favorite program because I can select all the pictures, I can make a book out of it, design the pages, add copy to it. This is the book I ordered from iPhoto through Apple. I just did this one night from my Mac. My favorite picture of Tanya. So simple and logical. I don't know why people out there with so many millions of dollars of research can't produce a simple thing like iPhoto, which Apple has done. Nobody does that in the PC world. That's why I switched to Apple. My name is Gautam Godse, and I'm a software projects manager. It's kind of cliched, but when you get a child, it's kind of it's very wonderful. A, because you get like a unformatted hard drive. So you're trying to now format it in your own image. And everything that you have learned over the past, 34 years of my life, I'm trying to format my child's brain. And in that sense, it's very intuitive because A, you don't have something like an erase button. So you can't erase something you've put down into your child's brain. So you got to be very careful of what you're going to write. And that sorts of puts a censorship in your own actions. So you're constantly saying to your child, oh, don't do that. Whereas you actually know, well, let the child do that because, that's how it's going to find out.
So how do we capture our innocence again? Well, I like to do it by going back and remembering things from my childhood.
A scenario that we've all experienced is being in a long relationship, a romantic involvement with somebody, and it ends. And now we're headed out into the world again, and we meet somebody new. To me, this is called the rebound effect, because that person doesn't have a shot for a new relationship. You're going to carry all the baggage from your previous relationship into this one, looking for a similar comfortable environment.
But if you're innocent about the relationship, if you approach it with an openness, then you might actually get something out of the relationship.
One of the things you can do is return to your childhood. You see a mud puddle, splash in it.
Yeah, remember when you worked for no money. Remember when you just were doing it because you loved it. That's what you need to capture, that innocence.
We're always looking for some sort of control in our lives. We're doing the safe things. Look for something unexpected. Test yourself. Push the envelope.
Coincidence is no accident. The world around us influences us. A great exercise I do is I take all these photos, I glue them in a book, and then later I go back to that book and I write captions for those images, and I try to tell a story with the images that I've assimilated in this book in the order that I've chosen.
It's all about looking at things for the first time, feeling a fresh experience as you go back to that world.
Right, it's like once these images are pasted in a book, you forget about them.
You close it.
Right, but then when you go back and you re-experience those images, now you have a fresh approach, and now you can write a story for them and have that story be something unique.
It's all about originality and trying to test that limit.
Innocence brings us back to our humanity. It brings us back to when we were a child, when we let the rhythms of the world guide us, when we didn't fight and control the world, we just let nature's rhythms take us on a journey.
Life is essentially rhythm condensed and replayed, because a molecular biologist will tell you that from a molecular point of view, what you are a series of genes that are being turned on and off over time. You know, the puberty genes are turned on when you're 12 and 13. The senescence genes are turned on when you're 70 or 80. You are essentially like a kind of musical score being unraveled in time. And the nature of this unravelment or unfoldment is a rhythmical unravelment or unfoldment. You know, we make strides into adulthood when we're adolescents, and then we slip back, and then we make further strides, and then we slip back. Everything is a process of rhythmical repetition, enunciation of the theme, development of the theme, summation of the theme, modification of the theme, the new theme, this self-reflecting, self-ascending process that builds on the patterns that have already been established. This is what rhythm and resonance permits. It permits a complex enough universe that self-reflecting beings like ourselves can exist.
The great thing about Terence McKenna's view is it encompasses much of what we've attempted to convey to you today. The connectivity of all concepts and realities in our world.
How everything in this world is intertwined. That the work that I create for clients is intertwined with my own personal art. And nothing is an island. It's all intermingled, it's all related. There is no separation of design as a commodity versus design as art. It's the same thing, and it's all about your perspective and what you choose to believe. That great design is art, that it isn't a commodity, that it's a meaningful thing that has purpose and meaning and can transcend cultures and take your ideas around the world. And all you want to feel is that the work that you put into something, your heart, your soul, all your energy went for something good, for some greater meaning than just a blip on the TV screen for 30 seconds. And if you approach your work as art and not a commodity, it will become that. If you approach every project with that passion, with that drive, you will fuel amazing visions.